Awesome. Well, I guess, hang on one second here. We can start by, if you want to introduce yourself and your Patreon, we can start there.
Yeah, my name is Roman. I'm from Russia, by the way, and I ran a little Patreon miniature sculpting, I guess you can say, campaign called Gloomy Kid Minis. You may or may not heard of me before. I basically started like I think over a year ago,
Okay.
around 2 years, I think. I think first I get my grasp on sculpting around 2 years ago, and I started my Patreon, very, very small Patreon page, around July 2019. Yeah, and I sculpt digital miniatures, 3D printable STL files, basically.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So I think that for sure I'll have links in the description down below. So anyone watching or listening, definitely check out Gloomy Kid Minis. We're gonna have a bunch of links down below to the Patreon and My Mini Factory
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So definitely check it out because I
Yep.
think it's awesome.
But if you have any questions right now or want for me to talk about something, feel free to do so.
You know, at a certain point, I told myself I was going to try to be professional with this series and I was going to have, questions that I was going to ask every artist and try to get a good foundation and sort of get to know them. But then again, I thought about it and I realized that that's just kind of not the way that I work. It's not really my style. So just kind of like go by whatever questions I come up with at the time. But I guess
Yeah.
one question I do always ask artists is, do you do anything with your own models? Do you play D&D or do you use them in like a
Oh
personal way?
man, I have like not only my own models. I have a shelf full of printed miniatures. Uh, like I've said, let me tell you a little bit how I started.
Yeah.
Basically, I came to sculpting overall through Critical Role.
Ah, okay.
I've never played D&D before, and around 2.5 years, I was introduced to the beautiful world of Critical Role, and I watched a lot of basically pre-recorded shows. Never bothered with the streams, but basically I really loved it, and I wanted to try this experience myself. And no of my friends played D&D before, so basically I had no choice but become a DM. And one thing, this is very this was very awkward. A couple of first sessions when we didn't know a clue what we were talking about, what we were doing, and what we were playing. We was making up rules on the spot with a little brochure as a reference, and this was an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. This is I think that for me personally, D&D is something that's really important to me and it's amazing, but I think that one of the things I love about D&D the most is that there really is no wrong way to play D&D. And I know that there's going to be people out there who say, you got to follow the rules, you got to do this, you got to do that, whatever. But as long as you're having fun, you as the DM and your players are having fun, it really doesn't matter. And I think it's amazing whenever people get into it and they realize that the rules can be really weird and sort of overwhelming at times, and you just kind of make up their own stuff and it works and it's hilarious and amazing.
Yeah. And where the miniature thing come along, I really wanted to have basically minis on a table, and I didn't have any minis so far, so I had a choice. Rather, I would go to the store and basically buy everything, like noser miniatures. But let's be honest, that's a lot of money. To have like an assortment of miniatures for every encounter that you would possibly can have on a table. So I sort of an alternative to buy a 3D printer and basically print minis for my own games. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I started with some of the classics like Miguel Zavala stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's like founding father of this craft, I think.
Yeah,
and a personal inspiration of mine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful to him for a lot of the amazing models he's made and how accessible he's made them to the community. It's so amazing.
And at one point I needed a wolf model, a basic wolf.
Right.
And everything I've seen on Thingiverse kind of didn't fit my bill. I just felt, yeah, I could use that, but it kind of lacked the detail or something didn't really work for me. So the thing I did, I exported a 3D model from World of Warcraft, I think.
Oh, okay.
Like I didn't have any experience with 3D at all. Basically, I can't draw right now at all. I'm a programmer basically. I'm a developer.
Okay.
I work as a developer of a full-time job, and I didn't have any artistic any artistic history basically.
Right.
Yeah. And I exported this wolf model, and it was like, I don't know, like 30 polygons resolution, something like that.
Oh. Right.
Basically totally unusable. And I started. I decided that I would use Blender and basically smooth it all and maybe add a couple details. It shouldn't be that complicated after all, I thought.
Right.
Yeah, not the case actually. I vividly remember my brain hurting over the weekend with this new software, but I think I got my results and I uploaded it to Thingiverse, and I got some attention from the community. I think my wolf is still, if you search wolf on the Thingiverse, I think that model will appear on the first page.
Oh.
Let me share my screen.
Yeah, I'm if we can't find it, I'll see if I can find it, and I will put it on. I'll put it in one of the.
Yeah. I will just share my screen. I think anyway. Yep, here it is.
Nice. Oh yeah,
right there.
No, I've definitely seen that before. I have personally printed that. That's exactly the one I was.
Yeah.
Talking. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a basic wolf model from World of Warcraft that I sculpted full on and like added some details and muscle definitions. I think, like it's looking back at it right now, I think it was a basic, very basic stuff, but it was a start. Yeah. There was like a ton of mesh errors. Teeth were practically hovering in the air. I fixed it since then, but yeah, it was a start. But I posted it, I think, on Thingiverse and Reddit, subreddits, printed miniatures. Yeah, and it got some popularity, and what was really inspiring for me, and I've decided to go on. And since then, I started like I think I did a remix of Miguel Zavala stuff. Yeah. This Owlbear.
Right, right.
Yeah, and then I remember I needed some hobgoblins for. I was running the mines of Pendelver.
Oh, okay, right.
This starting campaign, and I needed some hobgoblins, and I couldn't find any. So that was my first experience with making models from the start, from zero to hero, if you could say that.
That's awesome. That's and just for anyone who's watching it and doesn't know, so what we're talking about is taking a game asset from a video game, which you can do. There are different sites out there, and there are different like libraries of 3D models that you can get from a video game. But the difference is that when you create a model, and I am very, very basic with my understanding of 3D modeling, so I'm going to try to be correct with this, but we'll see. When you create a model for a video game, the requirements are very different than if you create a model for 3D printing. So whenever you get this model, and I've seen this done before, where you get a model from a video game, typically you can kind of think of it as like a stencil, I guess, and you can kind of sort of fill in the line. Like you have to do a lot of work to make it printable in a real world 3D printable space. And I've talked to a couple of different artists about, that's, I don't want to say it's a common way, but it's a way that I think I've talked to 3 or 4 artists now, and that's at least you and one other person. That's kind of how they got started. Somebody else that I've talked to, they got started by doing, full body 3-dimensional scans of people, like using a medical grade 3D scanning app. And even that was, or a piece of equipment, and even that did a good job, but it still had a lot of errors that they had to fix, and that's how they got started with 3D modeling. So it's very similar. A lot of people have gotten into it by wanting to create models of a very specific type, and then coming up with whether it's a game asset or it's a 3-dimensional scan that it still has errors. Like they've kind of learned from those stencils and learned from there to kind of fill in the gaps, and then learn more skills as they go on. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's basically called using base mesh.
You and your fancy terms.
Oh, I have this footage right here. I think it should be working, please. Yep. Awesome. This is me basically making Hippokin.
Oh, okay.
Let me show the end product. The footage is over 11 hours long, so we won't see it all.
Oh,
here's the end
right,
product. Yeah, this guy.
Awesome.
Let me show you how I did it, and we can talk over. If you have any questions, you can ask me at any time.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify that I was starting with base methods from World of Warcraft, basically this one model, and right now it wouldn't be fair to use third-party assets.
Yeah.
As a basis. Like this is personal stuff, personal use only.
Right. Yeah, and that is an important clarification. When you take assets that have been created by other artists, no matter what they were created for, and you bring them into a 3-dimensional space, it's not necessarily it's not your material. You're just kind of building upon something someone else has created. You don't really have any rights to that. 100%. And I it's important to make that distinction that your models since you've gotten your meshes are unique and custom miniatures that you're obviously building from the ground up, as we can see here. So one of my first questions, I guess, would be, where did the inspiration for this model come from?
The Hippokin? The hippo you can see right now, I think the fetus of the hippo you can see right now.
Yes, it's forming.
The blob. It's how do I say it? I tend to go to different exotic settings with my models.
Right.
There is such D&D setting called Space Jam. Please, please. My brain. Space Jam is another movie
Yeah, I
with
think
Bugs Bunny. What is it called?
I think I know what you're
Damn.
talking about.
It's not Planescape. It's another.
Yeah, I think it has Star in the name. Star Delver, maybe. I know the setting. you're
No,
talking about.
Spelljammer.
Oh, okay.
Spelljammer.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
not the one I
So
was thinking
basically, it's D&D in space.
Right,
Like you can see in Baldur's Gate video game trailer, a big spaceship, Illithid spaceship floating around, and the Geese spaceship. Yeah, it's space D&D stuff. There is a bunch of races, and they all travel through the void. I'm sure I'm butchering the lore, but it's the idea in my mind, at least.
That's the great thing about D&D, and that's the great thing about being a DM, is that when you sit down at that table, you take inspiration from what's already been done, but what you make out of that world is entirely yours, because you can make whatever you want. So whatever whatever lore you want to create. But I actually I was thinking of an entirely different. I think what I was thinking of is an entirely different game system, not just a different setting for D&D. But I am not very familiar with that setting, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
No.
It's really cool.
Yep. And there is this race, basically humanoid hippos. They are very militaristic and like disciplined and very much about their guns and firepower. Yeah. So I went with that idea.
Right.
One thing I'd like to mention that on my Patreon, basically with my style of work, I tend to focus on something that is not well represented within the 3D printing community.
That's awesome.
So I don't go with basic like orcs or elves. I feel like there is very much of those kind of models, and there is a lot of settings, races, monsters that are underrepresented.
Yeah.
And basically there's a market for that. If you can view it, if you want to view it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So recently, like I think for a half a year at least, I've been doing Dark Sun models non-stop, like almost non-stop. It's like a post-apocalyptic Mad Max, Conan the Barbarian setting,
Right.
With very subverted tropes. Like you have halflings, but that's not happy halflings.
Yeah.
It's a cannibalistic tribe of basically anti-vegans.
An anti-vegan.
Like,
That's an amazing explanation.
Yeah. Well, the premise of the world is that the planet is dying, basically. The magic siphoned all the life within, and there's very the resources are very scarce, and plant life in general are very scarce, and halflings are represent that. You may call it, pushback. Like they are preserving the nature.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, they don't eat vegetables at all. They rather cannibalize you and your party. Yeah.
Which sounds terrifying, to be completely honest.
Yep. The second breakfast sounds terrifying in that case. Yep.
Well, I'm definitely gonna have to look into this setting because this sounds fantastic. Although one of the
It
players
has
that I play with most often is my wife, and she is not a fan of futuristic. She likes playing in the medieval sense and like fantasy sense of
well,
she doesn't like
Dark Sun
sci-fi.
is not futuristic at
Oh,
all.
right. You were saying that. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, 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 yeah. I'm talking about Dark Sun.
Yeah.
Spelljammer is a bit futuristic,
It
I think.
it looks
Like
more
there
like
is,
I want to say Geiger. I'm trying to think of the name of. There's an artist that created a lot of the early inspiration for Star Wars, and I'm trying to remember his name, but it looks a lot like his stuff. Where, and I'm gonna think of it as soon as we get off this channel, and I'm probably gonna get burned in the comments because I can't think of this. He's like the father of like the general modern sci-fi aesthetic, and a lot of what I'm seeing, I just looked it up here on my phone. A lot of what I'm seeing from the Spelljammer is very similar, like giant living ships and
yep.
almost like Viking ships in space and that kind of stuff. Like it's this weird, almost I'm trying to think of the like ancient future. It's a weird. It's like the idea that we had of like a fantasy sci-fi race that lives in the stars. Like Thor, and it's just. What I'm seeing is really cool, and it seems like it kind of bridges that gap a little bit. But I have seen your Dark Sun models, and one of them that I was looking at, I mean, they're all pretty great, but there was one set in particular I was looking at that I'm pretty sure I'm going to be getting at some point whenever I start back up again with our campaign or a new campaign or something.
Yeah. One thing I've found working within this exotic settings is I think we are getting accustomed to various tropes, various fantasy tropes, and those settings were popular when it wasn't that set in stone like that. Like a lot of art and stuff you can see on the internet about Dark Sun or Spelljammer is pretty grotesque.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty weird. It's something new that you never seen before. Like I've seen like creature with two stocky eyes like a snail and something weird instead of a tail. And when you see something like that, you then try to represent this for a modern audience, not only to the fans of the setting, the old fans of the setting. You are working with this idea. You have a challenge of like modernizing it a bit, but preserving that weirdness.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the same problem I've had before while watching other artists work, is that I get so focused on what's happening on screen, I just get mesmerized. But
yeah,
I guess we should talk a little bit more.
We have a blob right here.
We should probably talk more about
now
your
it has hands.
process.
Yeah.
So what I see, and it's really cool, is that it's very similar to clay. Like I see that you started out with a lot of very rigid geometric shapes just to kind of get your basic shape in mind, and then I see you as you're slowly, you're bridging your gaps together. You're making some definition. You're bringing in the hips a little bit and creating some actual folds and making some definition of this model just from those rough geometric shapes. And I think that's really cool. But so do you use like a reference image, or are you just kind of going off of an image?
Oh, yeah. Always.
Okay.
If I think it's the best advice you can give anyone who's starting, like not only in sculpting but any artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
So use reference all the time. I have a second screen, and there's a bunch of hippo photos right there.
A little known fact about hippos: they're actually really dangerous. And I have a friend who probably won't ever watch this because he's not really into 3D printing, but we've fought a lot about what you should ride into battle. And my argument has always been that you ride a hippo. His argument is that you ride an ostrich. And I keep telling him that ostriches have really long necks, and that's a weak point, but hippos really have no weaknesses. Land or water, you're pretty screwed, but he just won't.
Hippo will annihilate the ostrich 10 out of 10 times. Did you know that hippo don't actually swim? Their bodies are so dense that they sink into the bottom of the river, and they basically run on the floor of the river.
Which is terrifying to think that there's just this massive muscle and rage that could be just lying below the surface.
Yep.
But I think that I love the idea that there are these, you know, whether it's D&D or you know, it's D&D typical fantasy setting, or if it's a sci-fi setting, there are all these amazing interpretations that you can have, and you could absolutely, hippos are known for being like really territorial, and you could absolutely come up with your own kind of general, what's the word I'm looking for? Like personality traits that an entire group might have because of the way that these creatures actually exist in real life. Or you can come up with something totally ridiculous. And I think that that's a ton of fun. And the idea that, you know, you're creating your own models and you're creating your own, you know, you're creating them for your own games, and you can create your own lore. It seems like this amazing, all-encompassing artistic process where you can come up with an idea of something that you need, you can create that model, then you can create the story for that model and lore for that model, and you know, that's really cool. And in this sense, obviously you're creating something that is from the setting, but I do really appreciate that you've tried to find some underrepresented creatures or you know, settings or models or whatever it might be, because that is something I've noticed a couple of times. And being on these 3D printing pages, a lot of people will say, you know, has anyone found any models of this, or can anyone point me in the direction of something like this? And usually when it comes to more eclectic things like that, or less well-known things or less popular things, it really can be hard to find that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that I do really appreciate about your Patreon and the models that you make, is that you do try to look for underrepresented creatures. And one thing I wanted to ask was, with that being kind of this idea that you go for the underdog creatures, or the ones that are less represented and less popular, do you like take a vote, or do you have any kind of community input on what your models?
Yep.
Awesome.
I have a great community, I'd say. I really love my patrons and the Dark Sun community in general. Like, I've never seen such a passionate response from people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really inspiring.
Good. I'm really glad. I know that I've made a couple of really great friends doing this in general, but I've made a couple of friends with artists, and some of them have found success in a very small niche, and some of them have been you know, creating stuff for a while, and it's a little bit more of a slow go for them. But in any case, I know that having those positive interactions and having those positive comments from their community, or just from the community in general, can be a really, really important, you know, response, and can be a really important and invigorating process where, you know, you're getting kind of burned out, or you're getting kind of frustrated, or, you know, you're not you know, not really having much response about these models, and then a couple of people say, you know, oh, I found your models and they were perfect for this setting, I really appreciate it, I love your style. That can be a really big deal. People, I think a lot of times random everyday people might underestimate how important that positive impact can be. And that's something that I definitely wanted to say. Like, trust me, I know enough artists that I promise you, and this is you, the general listener, or I guess viewer, I promise you that those kinds of comments, that kind of positive impact, that kind of positive feedback, even if you don't intend to use these models, is really, really cool. And it definitely is something that does not go unnoticed.
Yeah. Like what you can see here. Back to the model. Well, one thing I want to mention is you can see this little window that Zbrush has. Okay. Basically, is a silhouette window. If we go back a little bit, what I'm doing here currently with the model is I'm working with the silhouette pretty much. I'm not looking so much at the blob itself. Yep. I'm looking at the silhouette in miniatures. I think my personal opinion is silhouette and pose is the most is one of the most aspects. Like it's the miniature is so small on the table. Like basically what you see the most is the silhouette of the model. Yeah. Before any details, before any textures that you may put in, you can see the silhouette.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have heard. I think it was. I think it was Manuel that I was talking to last time was the one who he also mentioned that about how the silhouette can be really, really useful. And I totally agree. It's crazy how you can kind of almost trick yourself when you're looking at a three-dimensional model and you start putting details in it, but having the ability to kind of take those details out of it and see a much broader aspect. So the silhouette, like you're referring to, is really helpful, and to have that in real time is really great. So I can definitely see that being a really great advantage.
Yeah, I think let's skip a little bit further.
Sure.
You can see that I splitted the model right now. This is like my basic workflow. I tend to split. I tend to work on a model itself. Like Dynamesh should make it one big blob. Then split it into parts and work a bit separately, and pose separately. And then unify all the model together through booleans or Dynamesh or otherwise.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So
here we go with the eyes. Now it looks like a T-Rex.
It's a little bit. I was thinking that from the side profile, it does kind of look like a T-Rex or like Yoshi from Super Mario. But from the front,
he's a T-Rex.
But
cartoony, but still.
You are correct. He is. That's true. But so how many different pieces would you cut a model like this into? So we've seen that you've cut the head from the body. Now you're working on the head. About how many parts would you cut it into?
I think it's 6 parts.
Okay.
Okay, head, both hands, both legs, and torso, basically.
Okay, that makes sense.
When you split the model like that, you can work on posing. When you pose a model, you can work on it like an action figure, like
Right.
I think like G.I. Joe action figure. We didn't have G.I. Joes, obviously, but it's the closest thing.
Right. I get what you're saying. But yeah, I can totally understand that, and I'm actually very slowly. To everyone who's been working with me, I apologize. I promise I am slowly learning how to model, but it's going very slowly. The idea with this series was kind of that I'm helping other people learn while also learning at the same time. So I'm trying to ask questions that I would want to know starting out, and I definitely appreciate having that input. But I can see how you
can do it.
Steps.
I promise you can do it. I didn't think I could do something like that at all. It's not. It may seem like unclimbable mountain,
right?
But you can do it. It's once you get past the software, it becomes a ride.
Right.
Let's just say that.
Well, let's talk about software a little bit. So you said you started with Blender, is that right?
Yep.
So what made you switch from Blender to ZBrush?
Once I got a little bit into sculpting, I started to research. Basically, I watched a bunch of tutorials. And one thing I noticed at the time is a lot of tutorials were using ZBrush,
right,
rather than Blender, and I wanted to know why. So it turns out ZBrush is better for sculpting. Basically, Blender is one software can do it all. kind of deal. And Zbrush is for sculpting specifically.
Right, right.
Yeah. And one thing Blender has that Zbrush doesn't have is Blender is free. You can use Blender without any investment. And I promise you can do well in Blender without ever using Zbrush. There's a bunch of tutorials, but I thought that I would go with this software. And I think it's an industry standard basically right now.
Yes, I have heard that.
If you want to do sculpting, you want to go with ZBrush. One thing that ZBrush has a clear advantage over Blender is its performance. I don't know what kind of black magic did they use in the 90s when this software was developed at the first place, but it runs significantly smoother than Blender, even on limited hardware power.
I have actually, I've heard that same thing, and I've looked into it a little bit, and I do think that ZBrush is set up to be a bit more efficient with the way that it uses processing power versus, I guess, I think it's always a split on these programs, whether they use more CPU or GPU, and I do think that there are things that are set up a little bit more efficiently with ZBrush. However, I have heard a couple tutorials, or listened to a couple of tutorials rather, about how to set up Blender to make it not quite as efficient, but to make it much more efficient than it normally is, especially for blending. So if that's something that, you know, when you're just starting out, I've talked to a couple of artists about this, and you can feel free to interject with your opinion, but I've heard a lot of people say that when you're just starting out, Blender's a great resource because of it being free and because of it being a pretty robust sculpting platform. So if that's something that you're considering doing, I would recommend looking for a tutorial about how to set up Blender in a way that is efficient and uses your processing power most efficiently. And if you're going to be using it on something like a laptop, which traditionally laptops are usually a bit less powerful, depending on your setup, depending on, you know, what you're using at the time. Laptops can usually be a little bit less powerful, but there's also some settings that you can tweak in Windows as well to get a little bit more performance out of your laptop, specifically your power settings. A lot of people don't realize that when you unplug the power from a laptop, typically you're also enacting a power saving mode. So Windows will automatically throttle down a lot of your performance in order to save power. So you know, a lot of times to get the best performance out of your system, you want to go in and tweak your power settings, and then also, like I said, look up one of these tutorials for Blender. But that is a good point. There are definitely going to be software or hardware limitations when it comes to, you know, the type of software you're using. But I do see a lot of people using ZBrush because it definitely is one of the industry standards. And like you said, the difference between the two, not only are, you know, is one free and one, I think they have a subscription service now that isn't that bad. I think it's like $30 a month or something like that, and that's not bad if you're going to be doing it for this. Like I totally understand that, and I understand them, you know, wanting to make money for the product that they made. But I've heard a lot of people say that ZBrush is great because it does do one thing really well, versus Blender does a lot of things, and most of them it does do pretty well. Like I've heard that its ability to do sculpting has come a long way in a very short amount of time, where it, you know, it's actually pretty comparable now. And I do think that most people agree that ZBrush is a little bit better and has more features and geared more towards sculpting. But I've heard that Blender is a really great choice, especially for someone just starting out. And you don't want to be limited by how much money you can spend. So
Sure.
I think that, you know, for me personally, just starting out, at least for a while, I'm planning on using, I did buy an art tablet. So that's where my initial investment is going to go to a tablet that I can use with Blender. So that way I'm not, you know, spending money on a tablet and then also spending money on ZBrush. But that's for me personally. So, you know, for everyone listening, obviously make your own choices. But I think that Blender is a perfectly fine one to start with. However, ZBrush is definitely something to look into once you start getting a little bit more into this and you want to see what other features might be available.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that part.
So speaking of, what kind of
use Blender? I'd say another thing about Blender.
Sure.
ZBrush is pretty alienish. It has, at least for me, it has very steep learning curve at the very start. Like, it does things that no other software does. Like, you expect certain kind of interface, certain kind of menus from like file, edit, something like that, like Photoshop or Blender or Microsoft Word. There is some unspoken standards of how software interface should look and work, and Zbrush doesn't respect any of those.
That is actually something else that I have heard about it, looking up different reviews and tutorials, is that it does kind of work in its own way. So if you're going into this with any kind of knowledge about other programs, this may be, and I do think you can change some of the UI around a little bit, the user interface. I think you can move things around to make it a little bit more familiar, but I think for the most part,
customizable.
Yeah, for the most part, I do think there's going to be, like you said, a bit of a learning curve where you kind of have to accept that this is set up in a weird way that eventually just kind of have to get used to. And that's, just kind of adds a little bit of that learning curve. But so one other question I just popped into my head, about how long would you say start to finish, a model like this, or what's your average for a typical humanoid model like this that's roughly, going to be, what did this model top out at? Something like I'm guessing in the 40 millimeter range?
It depends whether I'm using something like a base mesh or I'm working totally.
Right. That would make sense.
Totally from a sphere. Usually, I can manage to make one miniature a week, but I'm not working full time on this. It's basically weekends and sometime after my full-time job. Yeah.
Right. Because, surprise, we are still working at other normal jobs.
Many of us are. I'm sure that someone like Andrea Tarabella from Artisan Guild
right
can do just fine without going to a full-time job.
Yes.
Well, his sculpting is his full-time job.
Right.
That's my point. Yeah.
And that's amazing, and I definitely hope that's the case for all of you guys. But for now, I think that, like I said, a lot of the general community might not always realize how.
A lot of us work on this part-time with very limited. It's
kind of a hobby
with very limited time. Yeah.
But I mean, I'll say I appreciate it.
It's a great hobby. Yeah. You can make some money out of it rather than spend a lot like it usually does with the hobbies.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, and I like I said, I love seeing all the different the newer artists. I love seeing new creations from artists that there have been artists that a year ago they posted something and said, hey, I made my first model, and I take notice of it, and I'll comment and say that looks great, and like I asked them how long they worked on it and some general questions, and just because I'm genuinely interested, and then I'll lose track of it, and time will go by and whatever, and then a year later they decide to start a Kickstarter, or they decide to start a Patreon, and I see how far their models have come in that year, because obviously, if I don't send a friend request or I don't keep up with them, I'm not really going to see anything. So for me, I go on with the rest of my life, and then all of a sudden they pop back up again, and I see how much their passion has driven them to improve their craft, and all of a sudden they have this amazing model that I'm blown away by, because like I said, I'm trying to learn this stuff, and I do appreciate the encouragement. I will get around to it eventually, hopefully soon. But I also do work full time, which can be difficult. So I totally get you there. But I'm blown away by taking these rudimentary shapes and creating something. Even this is, we're watching this come together in real time, but you can clearly see the shape that it's taking, and you can clearly see what it's turning into, and within a very short amount of time you've created something that you can, with a glance, tell what it's supposed to be, and that's more than I can say for most of the art that I've ever tried to create.
Yeah, I remember working on this model, and a lot of it was stumbling around, messing with clay until it looks good.
Yeah.
I think it's not very professional after all, but we all learn in our own ways.
I mean, I think it looks awesome.
Let us skip forward a little bit, or we're gonna see this head for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was gonna say we can skip as far forward as you want, and what I'll probably do, because I think that there are probably plenty of other people out there who love this stuff as much as I do, is we probably we're not going to be talking for the entirety of this sculpting video. I think what I'll probably do is I'll probably attach the video onto the end of our conversation, and I'll do like a quick time lapse and put some nice music behind it, so that everyone who, like I said, like me, who wants to see this come together start to finish, can kind of watch this sort of sped up time lapse, and that way, you know, even though we're going to be talking over this and asking, you know, I'll be asking questions and stuff, we'll still have that fun experience for the end too.
As you can see, this T-Rex started to look like a hippo.
Magically, just a few.
Yeah, I can tell you the secret. It's all in the ears.
It really is.
I can vividly remember that I was looking at this head and was thinking, why does it look like a dinosaur? What did I do wrong? And then it hit me. It was the ears all along.
Yeah. Yeah, ears make a big difference. That's one of the quickest ways that our brain identifies a reptile is typically they don't have ears.
Yeah.
I mean, typically, I'm pretty sure they never have ears, now that I think about that sentence. Can't think of any animal or any reptile that has ears.
Yeah. I don't think I can think one way either. Yeah. So right now I'm working on basic anatomy. Obviously, those things usually exaggerated in the miniatures. Right. Everything looks like it's gone to the gym like 24/7.
Yes, and that's something else that I do enjoy seeing. I love whenever artists create multiple versions of a typical model, which I understand is a lot more work, but I love when they create the sort of, you know, heroic scale where you have or not heroic scale, but the heroic representation, because heroic scale refers to a specific size. When you have the heroic representation of these, you know, these creatures that have, you know, like popping muscles, they look like they've been going to the gym, you know, for months on end and like eating nothing but, you know, raw eggs for every meal of the day and just pumping protein, and they look amazing. And then you look at yourself in the mirror, I don't look like that. And I mean, obviously part of it is that it's a fantasy world, so you want to be able to live out these fantasies. But I also love that there are other artists who create more, I don't want to say realistic, but more options, I guess, when it comes to the, you know, the wiry framed creatures that look more like, you know, sort of roguish and smaller and sort of like wiry and quick. And then you have the sort of in between models and the models that are a bit older. And like, I love just the amazing variety that people come up with to give these models more depth and more variety, and make them feel like more of a race of beings instead of just, you know, a general stylized idea of what they should look like.
Yeah. And this guy has a little belly.
He's got the hippo dad bod going on.
Yeah. Like, he was in the military for quite some time, so he can afford it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the uniform makes him look a lot thinner than he is.
Uniforms are slimming, I've heard that.
Yeah.
just like suits.
True that.
But this is a ton of fun seeing this come together. I love this.
You can see by the timeline, it's just start.
Yeah.
We can skip ahead, I think, a little bit more. Looking at it right now, I think I could have sped it up like 5 times, and it still would be entertaining.
That's fine. I mean, like I said, I'll certainly do a time lapse at the end so that anyone who's interested can absolutely watch the creation process start to finish. Because like I said, that's something I really enjoy. Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to mention right now is you can see I work with very low resolution. Like, you can see voxels, polygons basically. And when you're working on basic shapes of your model, you don't want to go like into millions of polygons.
Right.
You wanna stay low. I would even stay even lower. Like I'm still very much learning the craft, and now I look at it and I think I should have gone even lower in terms of resolution. Just to, you know, with lower resolution, it's easier to work on large forms, basic shapes, and things like that. And before you come to the details, because before you sculpt any muscle striations or you know, like textures and folds, you should have a strong base,
Right.
clean forms and such things.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I had noticed earlier, and I forgot to ask about, because I did notice that your it seemed like your resolution was fairly low, which means your polygons are fairly large, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
See, I'm learning stuff. I know stuff. But it also means that you can work, like you said, you can have work a little bit more efficiently and move a little faster with larger shapes. But that also is a way that you can keep a little bit more strain off of your computer, because the more polygons you have in a smaller area, the more your computer has to figure out what to do with each one of those polygons. So from what I understand, if you're having a hard time, if your computer's kind of chugging along while you're working on this stuff, you can try and lower your resolution a little bit and maybe get a little bit more performance out of it, because your computer's doing a little bit less intensive processing with each one of those individual polygons.
Yeah, and I'm working with Dynamesh here. I don't know if you're familiar with this stuff. There is a similar feature in Blender. Basically, I have you can have a very clean topology.
Okay.
Or you can remesh it on the fly, basically tapping Dynamesh, and it recalculates and triangulates all the polygons, and basically it works like clay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have heard the term before, but never quite understood it. Like I said, it's a lot of terms that I'm getting a basic understanding for, and then as I move forward, it starts to make a little bit more sense. But I appreciate.
The hand's gone the wrong way.
That looks so weird.
Yeah. Wait a second, I will realize that I put it. Yep. Mirror, please. Yeah, I'm using this brush for as a base for a hand. Like
Right.
the hands of the model is like own sculpture.
Yeah.
Like it's a very intricate part. So I'm using this base mesh, and then I will work on it further. But
So that's
as a placeholder.
Yeah, so they kind of give you some like pre-made assets for you to use as a base to start working from.
Yeah,
That's
you
really,
could get a lot of paid and free assets
that's really cool.
like that from the internet. Yeah,
The internet's an amazing place.
you can make your own actually. So
I have heard that. And it's something I wanted to start looking into with Mesh Mixer now that I'm understanding a little bit with a little bit more about modeling, but it's not something that I've tried to tackle yet.
oh, I'm very much amazed with the stuff people make with Mesh Mixer. Like I don't very much like this software myself. I basically use it for maybe error fixing, mesh error fixing, something like that, or some transforming the mesh, basically transposing the mesh, rotating it. But I've seen some amazing models out there that were made using Mesh Mixer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can remember this one, Bloody Glorious Hawk Boy. Well, one of the it was one of the top models on this Thingiverse.
Yeah.
What can I say? It's bloody glorious.
Yeah, I do remember seeing that. I remember thinking the same thing. I know that Mesh Mixer has some modeling brushes and things that you can do with it and capabilities, but I didn't realize just how detailed you could get with it. And it's not much of a comparison even to Blender, let alone to Zbrush, but the amount of stuff you can do with it is impressive. It's way more than I thought, and looking at some of the things people have done with it is pretty impressive. But like you, I use Mesh Mixer mostly for just editing files, whether it's repairing them or adding small bits to them, or kit bashing. That's one thing that I really enjoy doing with it.
Kit bashing is with Mesh Mixer is like one thing that I would recommend using Mesh Mixer for.
It's super
like it's pretty it's simple. It's maybe inefficient, but for kit bashing is ideal.
Yeah, that's.
I wish more people would use kit bashing for their models.
Yeah,
it's an awesome. You can make a whole army with basic skills. You don't even have to do 3D in any way.
Yeah,
just like with the physical models.
Yeah,
slap some parts together and get a whole new model on your table.
Yeah, it is really cool to give your models a little bit more of a unique and custom feel, just with a couple minutes worth of work. But I always get so wrapped up in watching it. It's so fascinating to watch this just come together and watch the little details. And I look at something and you move one piece and I think, oh wow, yeah, that does make a huge difference. Adding a little bit more material there or get a little bit of a line there. Like it's amazing to just watch the subtle details, how much one subtle detail can change the look of an arm or some major piece of a model.
Yeah, it's a little bit early for subtle details.
Well, subtle in my opinion is much different than subtle in your opinion, I'm sure, because my idea of modeling is very different than yours.
Here I'm working basically on some basic landmarks of the body, like bones and basic muscles. One thing I'm struggling with is forearms. Totally forearms. The anatomy of a forearm is, let's just say, a very complicated subject.
Yes, anatomy is a weird one, and that's something that I talked with Michael in my last video about, and he had some great references, and I'll link them down below for different artistic reference books that you can use for anatomy.
I have a recommendation here.
Oh, I would love to hear it.
I think the book is called Anatomy for Sculptors. I don't know if he mentioned that one.
I think he may have.
It's great. It's like it is like an awesome book. You can go, I think, just with this one for a long time to get some basic ideas and representation of the anatomy and the basic forms in this book is just great.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to double check and make sure that is the one that we talked about in I think it was the last one that I did. I will have
Anatomy for Sculptors.
Yeah, I think that's it. But if it's not, I'll definitely grab that and I'll throw it down in the links down below for different references. I know I've been trying to build up a different list. Each artist that I talk to, if they have a different material to recommend, so different reference material or different pieces of equipment or things like that, I'll always try to have them in the description down below. So if we talk about something like that, definitely check down below to see if it's been put out there.
Ooh, I want to talk about one feature of the Zbrush that helps me a lot.
Sure, yeah.
Think it may be useful to you and your audience as well.
I think that
okay.
I'm willing to listen to anything that you want to talk about with this.
Okay, like you see, I'm making the forms and etc. etc. And I'm using clay builder brush with square alpha. basically it's very messy. You can see the forms, right? But it's all dirty and jammed up and stuff.
Yeah.
And one thing you can do to clean it up, you can go and like with something like trim dynamic brush and like change the alpha of clay buildup brush, change the intensity, and go manually over this stuff. But one feature or you know, smooth it all, but smoothing destroys a lot of features. One thing I personally like to use, let me find it. It's called clay polish.
Clay polish.
Clay polish, yeah.
Okay.
You can see it on the right part of the screen, right here. Basically, what it does, it preserves the main features of the mesh, kind of smoothing and flattening all the rest. Let me find where I go with it. Up, back. Right here. Like you see, it's all jammed up. And then, bam.
Wow. Yeah, it does make a big difference.
You can see it become, it's become a lot cleaner. I think I'm gonna like redynamesh it right there and go again. Like you see, you can clearly see all the basic features, and you can use this as a base for more details when it's much more cleaner.
Yeah,
than it was. Yeah, it's a little thing that I use. I don't know if many artists use this trick, but it may be useful.
Absolutely. So one thing I'd like to see, if you don't mind, if we can skip ahead a little bit, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And take a look at some of the more finer detail stuff. That's something I'm interested, because, like I said, that what I'm seeing a lot of your what I think are you know, fine, subtle detail changes, and I'm curious to see when we get to that point what you would consider to be like a subtle detail change, and just how subtle.
Let me.
You make those changes.
Let me go. Oh, here I'm started working on his shirt, I think.
Okay.
Like, okay, here's I think my day one of this model.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, this is. At this point, I've said, okay, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Let's go catch some of these.
Because even artists need sleep.
No, not really. we don't need sleep.
He's just fueled by passion.
Yeah, and
coffee.
Red Bull. Yeah. Yeah, there is a lot of fine stuff here already.
Yeah.
But let me skip ahead and Yep.
Okay.
So the close.
You use the base model that you've already created to kind of use as a reference.
This is one way, and I think a lot of artists use this way to make clothes. You can mask the part of the model, like I did here.
Right.
Back, like I did here, and then place extract.
Oh, right. Okay. See, I understand that. So that's a really cool and quick and efficient way to make clothes. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, basic to start making clothes. Let's say that.
It gives you a base to start from, kind of like what you're talking about before. Now you kind of refine that model a little bit to get it a little closer to what you need, but you have a good starting point. It gives you a reference.
It works very well with shirts, with pants. Like if you have a flowing cloak, I think it's best to work with some kind of other base, like a square or a plane. But if you have a jacket, I think I'm making a jacket right here.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. That jacket. That's all.
That's really
I'm not
cool.
gonna do it. I'm not gonna do with it anything at all. It's just like this. It's a joke. Yeah, and one thing I like to do when working with clothes, like you see, I've extracted, and you see that the topology of the model is very messy. It's basically what it was with the anatomy, but separated to another subtool.
Okay.
And one thing I like to do with it is remeshing, like you see here. There is awesome feature of Zbrush called Zero Mesher, right there.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see it through the player interface, but it's right here on the right part of the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the software kind of recalculates and makes it a much more cleaner topology, which work better with something like clothes or hard surface stuff. Yeah, and I will go from there.
Awesome. Okay.
Some flaps.
Everybody's got to have flaps.
If you're a military official, it's basically a requirement.
Absolutely.
I don't know why they don't go with flaps nowadays.
I mean, I think everyone should have some kind of a coattails or just a full-on flappy half cloak. It's just so much more classy and draws attention. But I'm loving seeing this come together. Like I said, I've watched so many of these tutorials, but or I've watched a lot of the time lapses of these creation processes. But being able to actually talk to the artist while it's happening is a ton of fun.
I wouldn't call this time lapse. I don't think it's sped up in any way.
It's not so much.
It's pretty much raw footage. I think I've deleted some parts when I've gone off the workstation.
Right.
Like for some tea or, basic biology necessities.
Okay, so artists also drink tea. It's good to know. I'm keeping notes.
We drink tea all the time in Russia. Like
tea all the time.
I don't. Yeah, that's very important.
I actually did just recently get myself a new teapot, which I need to start using.
Is you are from the US, right?
Yes.
Is this true that you warm your tea in the microwave?
Okay, so that's a common misconception. We're not barbarians. we heat the water in the microwave first, sometimes, if we're being really lazy, and then we put the tea bag in. So, I mean, yes, I guess technically we heat the water, then we use it for tea, but if we're not feeling super lazy, then we'll heat it in an actual teapot.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think this interview should be over. I can't talk to you anymore.
But to be completely honest, I so rarely drink tea anymore. It's mostly just coffee. And we used to have a Keurig, one of the ones that makes like one cup of coffee at a time. And we thought that was great. And then we had kids and realized that that's not going to cut it. We need like a pot of coffee a day. I guess at this point, what's like one piece of advice that you think is I wouldn't say the most important, but what's one really good piece of advice that you would want to give to somebody just starting into this hobby?
Oh, I think I have several. I don't know.
I mean,
if you're just starting with 3D sculpting, just do it. Like, don't think. Just practice. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Like if you don't make this sound obvious, but it's true. You can't make any progress if you don't do anything. You can watch a ton of videos, a ton of time lapses, but unless you go with a 3D tablet yourself, you never make it a reality.
Okay.
Never make it your hobby. Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, that's really very applicable to most things. If you can get paralyzed by the idea of failure, you can get paralyzed by the idea of what could go wrong and what what obstacles might be in your way. But if you don't just give it a shot, then you don't really ever get started. And I think that's a great bit of advice.
Another advice I would say, don't try to do it with the mouse.
Okay.
Get yourself a basic Wacom bamboo graphic tablet and just go at it.
Yes,
I know a couple artists that very much proficient with the mouse. One of those I think is also a Russian man. I will butcher his nickname. I'm sorry if you're hearing this. I'm so sorry. On Moiji, I think.
Huh.
Yeah.
I feel like that name sounds familiar. I might have seen it somewhere.
I think he's very well known in the community.
Okay. Well, I'm apologizing or I guess I should say I apologize for not knowing that name right off the top of my head. I feel like I have seen it.
It's maybe just because I'm butchering the pronunciation. Or
we'll go with that.
Yeah,
it's your fault that I don't know them.
yeah. I'm ready to take the blame. And he's very proficient with the mouse. Like I've seen some stuff he makes, and I'm amazed that he can make it like using not anything pressure sensitive like a tablet or anything.
Right. I mean, I guess if you have a really good sense for what you're trying to do, and you have that artistic eye, then you can kind of sort of figure it out by making subtle adjustments. But yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that you can start with a mouse, but it's not that expensive to get
rather don't. Like it's a very fragile. It's very likely that you will try and start with the mouse, and then you won't like what you are getting. You feel like you're not good enough or something, and it's just the tool that you are using is not right. Like don't try to learn how to ride a bike on a broken bike, or on
a unicycle.
On a unicycle. Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You can do it, but rather have a bike.
Yeah, it's not really going to teach you how to actually ride a bike. Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, what I've heard is that you can start with a mouse, but it's cheap enough that you can find, and I do have a couple of different options down below for different tablets that either some that I've used or people that I know have used, and they recommend. You don't have to spend a lot of money on a tablet.
It basically makes almost no difference if you go with something that costs like, I don't know, $75. Like, I don't know how much Wacom bamboo costs right now.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I know I have a couple of options down below. Most of them are in the, I think, like I said, they're in like the $40 or $50 range, and you get a decent sized tablet with a good amount of pressure sensitivity and a couple of different buttons.
Yeah.
And, so these kinds of items have come down in price a lot since I started looking at it 2 years ago. So it's not that expensive, and I do think that it is a worthwhile investment if this is something you consider doing for a while. If this is something you're interested in. I'll certainly check the links that I have down below, or take a look and see if you can find any good deals on tablets. I think that it's worth trying. And like you said, if you're going to start learning something, learn how to do it the way that gives you the best chance of succeeding. And I think that those tablets are going to help you a ton.
Yeah, I think it's a great hobby. And right now with the 3D printers, it's great. It creates a whole other feel. For it, then you can basically go and then touch your model that you created. It's an awesome feeling, and play with it on a table with your friends, like role-playing games or war games or whatever.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is amazing to be able to create this art and then bring it into the world in a three-dimensional space. It's really cool. Yeah, so I really enjoyed seeing this come together, and I definitely look forward to seeing more of your models in the future and working with you on another video like this again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I very much appreciate you getting interested in my stuff, and I've enjoyed our talk.
Absolutely.